Things Heard and Seen, inspired by Elizabeth Brundage's novel All Things Cease to Appear, is a 2021 American suburban gothic horror film written and directed by Shari Berman and Robert Pulcini. Amanda Seyfried and James Norton feature in the film. Netflix released the film on April 29, 2021. The picture did not earn the best reviews and was widely panned by critics. In today's video, we will be talking about the film Things Heard and Seen and all its details. The film begins with Catherine Clare, an art restorer, and her husband George, as well as their daughter Franny, residing in Manhattan in 1979. The family moves to a spacious farmhouse in upstate New York when George gets a position teaching art history at a college. In the house, Catherine, who suffers from bulimia, feels alone. She discovers an old Bible with the previous owner's family tree, the Smiths. Some of the names are wiped out and labeled damned. She detects the presence of a spirit and notices weird lights leading her to an antique ring, which she puts on. Franny believes she sees a female spirit in her room and refuses to sleep with her parents. While George begins a romance with Eddie's cousin Willis, Catherine hires brothers Eddie and Cole Lux as handyman and babysitters. Catherine befriends Justine Sokolov, a colleague of George's. Floyd De Beers, the director of the art history department, is invited to George's home. Floyd senses the presence of a soul, but tells Catherine that the spirit is benign and proposes holding a seance. Catherine learns that the previous owners, who died in a murder-suicide, were Eddie and Cole's parents, and that her ring belonged to their mother Ella at George and Catherine's party. She confronts George about the terrible past of the house. A radio starts playing while they dispute, and only stops when George breaks it. Catherine requests that George transport Franny to his parents' home. Catherine and Floyd have a seance while George is away, and the ghost of Ella is called. Catherine is warned by Floyd that there is another spirit in the house and that she must be cautious. Catherine learns of George's relationship with Willis. Justine overhears George and his dissertation advisor discussing how he was recruited without a letter of recommendation while on a class trip. Floyd approaches George, who confesses to falsifying a letter of recommendation. Catherine learns at a family meal that the paintings George claimed to be his were painted by his cousin, who drowned in a boating accident. Catherine has an affair with Eddie once her trust is damaged. George fails to persuade Floyd not to report him on a boat cruise. George arrives to school later, drenched, when Justine confronts him about his affair with Willis. George chases her car down the road, knocking her out and placing her in a coma. Catherine finds out about Floyd's death and Justine's mishap. A mystical artwork of death and a Christian cross from a book Floyd handed George is suddenly exhibited on a screen in George's classroom. George can't get it to go away, which enrages him and causes him to flee the classroom. Catherine prepares to leave with Franny at home. George injects her with narcotics and then murders her with an axe. Cole arrives to babysit in the morning, finding instructions from George not to disturb Catherine because she is sick. George arrives home from university, where he has been assigned Floyd's office and position, and pretends to find Catherine dead. He is suspected of being the perpetrator, but the authorities have no proof, so he's released. He drives Franny to his Connecticut parents' house. Catherine and Ella's souls join forces. Justine is awakened, and they show her what George has done. Justine has a conversation with the cops. George tries to flee on his cousin's boat to avoid getting apprehended. A storm approaches, and George's boat bursts into flames, evoking the event depicted in the picture. The cross in this image, however, is upside down, implying that George is doomed. Behind the scenes of the film's thrilling and action-packed plot, there's a fantastic cast. Oscar-nominated Catherine is played by Amanda Seyfried. George, Catherine's husband, is played by English actor James Norton. Justine is played by American actress Rhea Seehorn, and Eddie is played by Alex Newstater. Oscar winner Floyd is played by F. Murray Abraham, while most Netflix viewers will recognize Natalia Dyer as Willis, who plays Nancy in the sci-fi smash Stranger Things. Production began in 2019 when Amanda Seyfried joined the cast, with Shari Berman and Robert Pulcini directing from a screenplay they developed. Netflix would be in charge of distribution. Principal photography began in Hudson Valley, New York in October 2019, with James Norton, Natalia Dyer, Rhea Seehorn, Alex Newstater, and F. Murray Abraham joining the cast. With production beginning in 2019, the film was then released to the public to watch on Netflix on the 1st of April 2021. Robert Pulcini and Shari Berman, who happen to be married to each other, wrote and directed the picture. They warn EW not to expect a typical horror film because it's different from what we're used to seeing. I would hope that people could watch a movie and get caught up in the drama and the scares and the relationships, but also come away thinking about some of the bigger questions about karma, about the nature of life and death, Berman added. And also, as a woman, as a female director, director, I was very interested in the sort of idea of a woman finding her voice and struggling to find her voice in a marriage and in the world. The film follows and is based on a true story, which is also a best-selling novel. The 80s-set thriller tells the story of Catherine and George, a young couple whose marriage falls apart after they move from Manhattan to upstate New York and into a mansion already haunted by the supernatural. While the film may appear to be a work of fiction, there are some facts that inspired the show and its characters, especially for people who avoid horror flicks like The Plague. Things Heard and Seen is based on the best-selling novel All Things Cease to Appear. Nevertheless, many people are unaware that the book was inspired by true events in the author's life. Elizabeth Brundage, the author, spent time in upstate New York, just like the Clare family. Brundage reported on her website that after moving into an old house with her husband and small children, she found that we were not alone when her 3- and 6-year-old daughters began describing ghosts that lived there, notably 3 girls who died in a fire. Every morning on the way to school, the girls would tell her about the ghost and the 3 tiny girls who had died in a fire and whose mother and father had gone to heaven. They knew information that appeared impossible to make up, such as the names of the ghost and historical details concerning a polluted watermill down the road. She claimed that her youngest was literally giggling at something moving around the room one night. The daughter was grinning and pointing at it. She couldn't see it, but sensed something odd in the air. Brundage discovered 3 pairs of old children's shoes in a cupboard she had never opened when she and her family eventually moved out. She claimed on her website that she assumed they belonged to the little ladies who had been described as ghosts by her own daughters. Brundage developed All Things Cease to Appear as a result of those experiences, which were also influenced by the 1982 murder of Kathleen Krausneck, a woman found dead in her bedroom with an axe in her skull, while her 3-year-old daughter was still alive elsewhere in the house. Fans of the film will now be wondering whether or not there will be a sequel. Brundage never penned a sequel to the thriller, according to All Things Cease to Appear, and Netflix has yet to say whether there will be a second Things Heard and Seen installment. So far, it does not appear that a sequel will be released anytime soon. Given that the house at the center of both the novel and the film is meant to be cursed, a fresh plot with a new family at the center of it all is quite plausible. If the conclusion of Things Heard and Seen is correct, the spirit world is neither heaven nor hell. It is, on the contrary, in the middle of the two. It's an intriguing hypothesis that horror and mystery enthusiasts would love to see explored further in a follow-up to Things Heard and Seen. So let's hope the writers can come up with another storyline for a second movie, as we are enjoying the mystery the movie brings. And there you have it, everything you need to know about the horror film Things Heard and Seen, along with other details about the film, including the cast, writers, and directors, and whether we'll see a sequel to the film coming. Thanks for watching.